Record button. Okay, good. So welcome everybody to the MCAN monthly Zoom, where our guest presenter is Shannon Seigal from Environmental Voter Project. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Shannon, and I can make you host for your slides.
Great. Thank you all so much. It's amazing to see such a great crowd here today. My name is Shannon Seigal. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the organizing director at the Environmental Voter Project. To many of you, I'm reintroducing myself. It's so great to see a lot of familiar names and faces here, as well as a whole bunch of new folks. So a couple things before we officially get started. One, apologies that I'm sitting in my car right now. My landlord is installing a electric HVAC system in my building, switching off of natural gas. So unfortunately for all of us, this day is when that's happening for my upstairs neighbors. So I wanted to make sure you can hear me well. And then also I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts. So I see some neighbors here, Medford, Brookline. I used to live in Medford and I grew up in Reading. So neighbors to those of you in Andover. So just kind of placing myself here. EVP first got started actually in Boston, Massachusetts back in 2015. And I know a number of you have been with us since then. So I always love speaking to folks who are local to me. I am a Massachusetts person at heart, for better or for worse. So I am going to be going through some slides, as Phil mentioned, but we'll have time for Q&A. So feel free to send your questions while I'm going if you'd like, and then I'll just be able to see them all at the end. So for those of you that are already familiar with us, please know some of this will be a review, but hopefully we've got a good amount of new stuff in here as well. Big picture, if you said, Shannon, what does the Environmental Voter Project do? I would tell you this: we turn non-voting environmentalists into consistent voters. And in the great state of Massachusetts, where EVP did our proof of concept, we actually have hundreds of thousands of us who identify as environmentalists and a pretty substantial group that don't vote. So hopefully none of those folks are here in this call, but you may know some of them. You might be your neighbors. So that's what we do at EVP. And setting the stage for like why this is important is if we poll likely voters, like any poll that you look at for the most part, any poll that you see on the news is talking about likely voters when we have political polls. And this is a 2022 midterm poll. It's 2022 because that was kind of our last big federal election year. And we asked likely voters, okay, here's the top issues in the country today. What's the most important one to you when you vote? And we only saw 4% of respondents say climate or the environment was their number one issue. Now, when EVP first got started in 2015, that number was 2%. So I would say really good trajectory. We've doubled it, but a big way to go, as you can see, even visually. If you're running for office and you want to make sure the voters vote for you, you've got to follow the issues that are at the top here that most voters are saying they care about.
Shannon, let me just interrupt you for 1 sec.
Absolutely.
Will these slides be available afterwards?
Absolutely. And I'll just toss them here as well. So you're welcome to look at them now. Thanks for asking.
And Shannon, may I jump in? And could you make me co-host so that I can admit people who may still be trying to jump on?
Let me see. I'm actually not sure if I am host. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure. It looks like Mary is the host right now. So Mary should be able to switch that over for you. But this goes counter to what many of us know, which is that like increasing numbers of Americans, in fact, the majority of Americans think that climate is important. They want to see their elected officials leading on climate. So the issue here, which we've been able to identify at EVP, is this likely word. It's when we're talking about likely voters, like people that actually vote, that's where the gap is. Environmentalists as an issue group are actually not voting as consistently as other big issue groups, especially some of those that you're seeing high up on this list. So at the Environmental Voter Project, we are not trying to educate people to care about climate. That's what many of you do with your organizations, and that's really important. Instead, though, we're taking the people that already care about climate. They're already on our side, and we're helping them become better voters. So other organizations register these voters, they're doing that important work, or educate the voters or educate the candidates. Instead, we are just focusing on the already identified environmentalists and helping them vote. So we are completely nonpartisan. We don't do any endorsements. We never tell people who to vote for. We're just getting the right people voting. And this is important, kind of back to what I was talking about on that first slide. In many states, especially some of these swingier states that we think about and are on our minds, unlikely voters are twice as likely to list climate change as a top priority than likely voters. This comes from that same poll from that first slide. So when we're talking, like for Nevada, 5% of likely voters are saying that climate is the most important factor when deciding on who to vote for. When we talk about unlikely voters, so people that are registered, but that are just not likely to turn out, we double that, 10% are saying climate's an important factor. In Pennsylvania, that's even a little bit more pronounced. So this is demonstrating that the gap here, there are people who care about climate and will prioritize it. They're just not as likely to vote as many other issue areas. So this is a problem for what I just noted. Like if you're running for office, you have to follow the votes. Like you want to get elected, so you are most likely to lead on the issues that the likely voters in your constituency care about. So that's bad news for climate, right? No matter how great some of these candidates might be who are running for office, they know that climate's not ranking super highly. And you know, I'm talking big picture across the board, right? That's not the case in every city or every state, but if the voters aren't demanding that climate leadership, why are the politicians going to supply it? So we take a long-term approach to that at EVP. We're bigger than just one particular election, no matter how important that election might be. Instead, we're identifying these voters and we're mobilizing them for every single election that they have. We're talking local, state, federal, primaries, generals, runoffs, specials. Anytime a voter in one of our states can vote, we're going to help make sure that the environmentalists are turning out. This is like in Massachusetts, you know, we have town elections every year in most towns, and these are excellent opportunities for folks to work on that habit. We want voting to become a habit. So just like I can't say I have a habit of going to the gym if I only do it every 2 or 4 years, voting is not a habit if you're only doing it a fraction of the amount of time that you can. So that's what we're doing. Even when climate's not necessarily explicitly on the ballot for a particular election, we want our environmentalists to be flexing that voting muscle. And we do that with canvassing door to door, phone calls. Actually, this says text, but we're not texting right now. We're doing mail and postcards instead, as well as digital ads and direct mail. So this is how we identify these voters. I know that's probably a big question for many of you, is like, how do we even know who these people are? So we work with data analytics professionals to survey large numbers of voters right now in 19 states where we're active. And we just ask like that same question that you saw on that first screen. Here's the top 15 issues in the country today. What's the most important one to you when you vote? And we survey registered voters, and we pull all the people that say either climate or the environment is their #1 issue when they vote. Now we've got a list of all the registered voters in a particular state that answered our survey and said climate or the environment was their #1 issue. We then look at thousands of consumer and behavioral data points that are publicly available and appended to each voter on the voter file. And we see what these climate or environmental voters have in common. What data points are they sharing? So I'm not saying that because Phil drives a Tesla, which is an electric car, that Phil is an environmentalist. Instead, I'm saying, okay, here's 1,000 environmentalists in the state of Massachusetts. What do those people have in common? So we are not deciding what makes someone an environmentalist. It's based off of self-identification. So if people who self-identify as environmentalists, what do they have in common? Some of those things make total sense. Some of them are totally just correlated and it's not causal, but it allows us to build this predictive model so that I can take another voter who didn't answer our survey and I can see how well they fit into the model that we've created. And that gives every registered voter in a particular state a 0 to 100 score based on how likely they are to prioritize climate when they vote. So now we've got a big list of registered voters in our target states who are climate or environment first. Like that's their #1 issue above all other issues. Then we remove all of you who are already great voters. So if you haven't been contacted by EVP and you're like, I'm a top environmentalist and I'm a registered voter, it's probably a good thing. It means you're voting. So we only focus our time and energy and our volunteers and donors' time and energy on the people who are considered unlikely to vote in an upcoming election based on their prior voting record. So for 2024, we're talking about people who are unlikely to vote in a presidential general election. So these are people that likely have never voted before or they haven't voted in like 20 years. So we do this across 19 states in the US, of course, Massachusetts being our first. And these are the states where we have the highest proportions of these non-voting environmentalists. You see it's a mix. We've got blue states, red states, purple states, states that are constantly changing. We are following places where we have these high numbers of low propensity environmentalists because those are the places where EVP is best positioned to make an impact. So you'll see like Wisconsin and Michigan are not EVP states. They're still really important states, like obviously on a federal level, but we just don't have the numbers of low propensity environmental voters in those states where EVP is best positioned to make an impact. There are other excellent organizations working in those states, mobilizing those voters. So there's more on the About page on our website. I know we've got a couple more minutes before the Q&A, so I'm just going to show you all a few results as well. So our last, as I mentioned, we do turnout every single year. We mobilized voters in over 300 elections in 2023. But I'm going to show you some 2022 numbers because that was the last time every one of our voters had an election. So in 2022, many of you on this call joined us to contact over 2.3 million individual voters. And we did that with hundreds of thousands of phone conversations, hundreds of thousands of volunteer postcards, as well as direct mail pieces and digital ads that we send out from EVP to millions of voters. For 2024, we have 4.8 million voters across 19 states who are top issue environmentalists who are unlikely to vote. So we are hoping to more than double the number of individual voters contacted and get pretty close to that 4.8 million total this year. So since 2015, we've contacted, we're finalizing our 2023 impact numbers. A few states like Louisiana haven't shared their public voter files from 2023 yet. We've actually now contacted over 10 million individual voters. So these are unique people who at one point were so unlikely to vote, but so likely to care about climate that they landed on our list in the first place. And now over 1.5 million of them, again, we're hopefully over the next couple of weeks getting the total numbers, but they're now voting so consistently that we don't need to contact them at all. So in Massachusetts, we have over 114,000 people who care about climate who hadn't been voting, who have now voted in at least their most recent local, state, and federal election. So they are now considered high propensity voters, and they're the ones popping now. Like if you're canvassing for a city council candidate and you want to talk to people and ask what issues they care about, you are going to those 114,000 new super voters and you're asking them about their priorities. And of course, that's the case in these other states as well. So just looking at the last few years, giving you a sense of what these numbers look like. So we also run randomized controlled trials, which means that we have a control group of voters who we don't contact for every single time we contact voters, so that we can compare the turnout of the voters we did contact to the voters we didn't. And these are statistically significant results at a 95% confidence interval. So that means we are at least 95% confident that these results are not due to random chance. These are due exclusively to EVP's voter turnout campaigns. So in 2020, our last presidential year, we had statistically significant results in a number of these elections, particularly primaries, but a few general elections as well, notably Pennsylvania being one of them. 2021, we had a lot more opportunities with local elections, and you can see our potential for impact was even higher. We saw 3.9%, 4% increases in turnout. 2022, our last federal election year, and a number of results from 2023 as well. There we go. They're populating that a little bit more. So a whole bunch of different types of states, a whole bunch of different types of elections where we were able to have a measurable impact. And I know you all, after the presentation, might be talking about local opportunities. So I just wanted to flag two particular elections from last year where we were able to see how small elections can make a really big impact. So while we're really focused on the 2024 presidential election, we don't want to forget about the local opportunities and why it's important that we look beyond 2024, that we're looking at 2025 as well, and the local elections that are happening between now and the presidential. In El Paso, there was a climate charter ballot question called Proposition K, which was going to give the mayor and the city council a little bit more purview to make climate action. And it was going to ban the sale of city water for fossil fuel extraction outside of city limits. Right outside of El Paso is one of the biggest fossil fuel locations in the country. In this election, Proposition K did not pass. EVP is not partisan. We are not telling people how to vote or who to vote for, but turnout for that election was less than 10%. So had there been more climate voters voting, this seems like a really interesting opportunity where a local election could have had a big impact. And similarly, in Kansas City, they have a publicly elected board of utilities. And last year, that there's a 6-person board. 3 of the seats were up for re-election or for election, and 3 new pro-clean energy candidates won that election. So now the board is majority pro-climate. Again, that was a nonpartisan election. We did not tell people who to vote for, but that public utility owns a coal-fired power plant, owns and operates a coal-fired power plant. And now that board is majority clean energy supporters who are looking into shutting down that coal-fired power plant. So that's another, I think, like really inspiring opportunity. We contacted thousands of voters for that election and helped make sure environmentalists showed up. And these are happening in our backyards as well. And we have volunteers who have enjoyed working with us. I know there's at least one person in Andover. This is April, who's with Andover Indivisible. She's been working with us for a number of years. But I should, I guess, maybe tell everyone, but that is one I will unanonymize because I know she may know some of you on this call. But volunteers are appreciating the work that we do and that it is data-based. I know you have a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different excellent organizations vying for your time and your energy this year. We are very fortunate when we get any of it. And those other organizations are wonderful as well. But we know that when you work within the Environmental Voter Project, we are accountable to you to making sure we show you those results and that we're only asking you to do things that we feel very confident are actually going to make a difference. And news sources have said so as well. So we just really like this to summarize why we do what we do. It's both hopeful and well supported. So we want to make sure that we're always giving folks opportunities to concretely make a difference. And this is just a snapshot of what our April calendar looks like. Happy April 1st. This is not a joke. These are actually real. Each of these phones is a phone bank opportunity. These little blue circles are fundraisers that we have that are state specific. So we're highlighting Texas, Georgia, Nebraska, Pennsylvania. And then we've got a webinar as well as some canvases. Unfortunately, no canvases in Massachusetts, but we've got Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Austin, Texas, and Tucson, Arizona, in case you find yourself in any of those cities. And then all the phone banks are virtual opportunities that you can participate in from wherever you're joining this Zoom call. Is a great spot to join our Zoom phone banks. So you can see all of these and more at environmentalvoter.org/get-involved. You'll get those links as well. but I really encourage you. We have, especially during Earth Week, 8 different opportunities for you to join in and to make an impact. So if you haven't already started your voter mobilization for environmentalists this year, April is a really perfect time to start. So I'll leave this slide up just for a moment in case you want to take down any of these links. But again, you'll get this as well. I sent that slideshow in the chat. I know I went pretty quickly, but I'm eager to get to folks' questions. So I'm not sure. I'm happy to read through the chat, or if anyone would like to, toss me a question verbally, that works as well.
Could I ask Pamela Dritt to go ahead and ask you her question that she had dropped in the chat?
Yeah, thank you, Pamela.
Let me unmute myself. Yes. I really support Environmental Voter Project for exactly those reasons, because there's so much stuff that we think is true that doesn't turn out to be true, and things that we think can't be true that turn out to be true, like environmentalists don't vote. So this is important, but how do you find the environmentalists? You sort of glossed over it. You said you look at the characteristics that are associated with the voters on the voter files. Mm-hmm. Where does that come from?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there's a few different companies involved. So we work with on the voter file is a company called VAN, NGP VAN, for those that might be familiar. Their headquarters actually in Somerville, coincidentally, but they are largely the voter file shared by progressive organizations broadly. So that's the main house of all this voter file data. So who you vote for is secret, whether you vote is public. So I could call up the Somerville elections office and say, hey, can you give me the voter rolls? Basically what VAN does is it compiles that so that each organization doesn't have to get all of that individually. But then when I mentioned,
so like the right wing does, only on the side of good.
Exactly. Every campaign does it. So yeah, this work company specifically only works with, generally speaking, progressive organizations, but there is an alternative as well. So that's where the voter file is housed that we're using. And then as part of that, there's an organization called Target Smart that helps with this really specific targeting. So they're the ones compiling that other publicly available consumer and behavioral data and kind of appending it. So again, it's the same thing where it's like public data, but we're not chasing down all these organizations to like get it. But it includes things like, as I mentioned, are you registered as driving a particular kind of car? That's public record. Are you a homeowner or a renter? Do you live in an urban zip code, a rural one, or a suburban one? Are there children in the home? Are you a member of any professional organizations? It's kind of things like that are these more or less random points. But when we have all sorts of people, we can map them out and it can help us identify some trends. So that's a great question.
Do you look at non-registered to vote people who could?
Yeah, so other organizations do some work with identifying potential people who can register to vote. That is a very different database because that information is not in the voter file. So all of our work is based on voter file, but groups that do voter registration have their own resources to identify like potential people who could register to vote, and that's really important as well.
Okay.
Is there one more question? Is there a way to connect?
Pamela, please give other people a chance. I see Dan's hand raised from Medford. Unmute yourself, Dan. Thank you.
Yep, unmuted. Hey everyone. Thank you, Shannon. Super informative and inspiring. You mentioned that you focus on getting unlikely voters out to the polls, but don't try to elect particular candidates. And the thought that popped up into my mind was, if someone doesn't know how to differentiate candidates across their priorities, they're much less likely to vote. Do you think there's a gap in terms of voter guides within the climate community, or do you think those are adequately served through existing organizations?
Very good question. So I think part of your question is getting at a really good point of like, is it a chicken or an egg situation with these environmental voters? Are they not voting because they're not seeing people they want to vote for? Or are they not voting for another reason, and then candidates are not following suit. So when we first got started, we tried to do some polling to identify like which side that problem was. And it's actually really, really hard for people to truthfully identify why they don't do something. Because we're able to see like, okay, someone says they're not voting because there's not climate candidates, but then even when there are climate candidates, kind of like those 2 elections I highlighted, people still aren't necessarily voting. So luckily, the behavioral science is such that regardless of the reason why someone isn't voting, we do have really good insights on how to get them to vote. So this is getting at another part of your question. Interestingly, with low propensity voters specifically, regardless of their issue area, talking about specific issues or candidates is not effective. Pretty bizarre. Like, we don't vote rationally. We often vote because of how we feel. So we have done some testing that shows that saying like climate's on the ballot this fall, make sure you vote, is not nearly as effective as saying turnout's going to be high this fall, make sure you're not left behind. Kind of bizarre, but that's true. So ultimately, we are so focused on our targeting of environmentalists that we feel that we can just mobilize them to vote, and they will vote climate when they vote. But your other piece here of like, are there gaps in voter guides? We do think there's other organizations that have the expertise around voter guides, like League of Conservation Voters is a good example. We do see gaps though. So the gaps are often at these more local elections. It's really hard for other organizations to get on that local level and tell people about particularly local candidates. So it's certainly a gap that we would love to see filled, or love to see other organizations helping with some of that education once we do have somebody voting. But we feel that EVP is best equipped to be on the more like demand side for climate. So great. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jane, do you see any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, a bunch. One is more a comment. Heather Packard from Mass Audubon was saying that they would really like to be exploring partnering with EVP more this year. But another person said, I'm a texted a lot with the EVP via, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself? And you can say this.
Hi, my name is Lakshmi Rao. I live in Bedford. I'm also a member of a couple of individual groups. Way back, I don't know, 2018 and 20 cycles, I believe. I texted a lot with you, EVP. Regularly, you had campaigns. I know you just said phone banking and all other activities. Will you be, I'm interested in texting if you have any in coming months.
Yeah, it's a good question. So texting had been a really central part of our work from 2018 into September 1st of 2021. And I'm able to tell you a specific date because we stopped texting on September 1st, 2021, because a new slate of restrictions came online from the phone carriers. So like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, like the phone companies, that made it no longer compliant to text people off of the voter file. So even though phone numbers are public information like that, you know, like similar to a phone book, as you notice when you text with us, you text like through an app. So even though you're still hitting send, it's mediated through an app. And that was basically recategorized such that you can no longer use that type of technology to text people who you don't have an explicit opt-in from. So for example, a candidate might be able to text you if you like donate to their campaign and say they can text you. But that means that unfortunately EVP is not able to do that type of large scale voter texting, unfortunately, even though it is a very effective tactic. But we are still able to use texting on a small scale for things like sending you reminders about our events, because we're only texting people that have wanted to hear from EVP specifically. So if those, it's not illegal. Other organizations are texting, but the risk of texting non-compliantly is that you can get really big fines from the phone carriers, like a fine on every text message. which could be millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And maybe more scarily, like message blocking. So there's been reports that an organization could send out 100,000 texts, and like a quarter of those texts could just be blocked by the phone carrier, and we would never know that that voter didn't get it. They don't have to report back when they block that stuff. So that's probably going more in the weeds than anyone was curious about. But if those restrictions were to disappear, we would be really excited to pretty immediately start texting again. But at this point, it's been a few years, and it's not necessarily looking hopeful in that regard.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Lakshmi.
We have a question from Alyssa Pearson. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. This is very exciting. We have been putting together a tabling opportunity. We wanted to connect people who attend a concert film of an environmental oratorio. It's showing at Greenfield Garden Cinema on April 15th. And we wanted, after the show was over, we wanted to connect people to the work that they could do. And we have a number of organizations tabling. Mothers Out Front, I see, is here. And CAN and YCAN and Sierra Club, I believe, has also been contacted. We're curious if there was an EVP person, or if there were materials you'd like us to put out. Ideally, it would be a person, because we're hoping to let people forge personal connections and find their groups that they'd like to engage with in person. So this is like a capacity building exercise, ideally connected to a performance. About 200 people hopefully will attend. Thank you.
That is fantastic to hear about. I hope everyone, I saw that information's in the chat as well, if folks do want to check out more of the details on that. Hopefully everyone here is able to join. It's unlikely that we're able to have somebody on the ground, just because our staff is totally remote now. So our schedule gets pretty full, but we do have like informational half sheets with a QR code that I would be more than happy to send you a file of and have that opportunity shared with folks. So if you put either your email in the chat, or maybe even easier, I'll put my email in. If you want to just send me a quick message, I can make sure you get that half sheet.
Neat.
Thank you.
Oh, Fred, before I call on you, Heather Packard, you had your hand up for a minute. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Dan and I are actually just chatting on the back end. Because one of the things, I don't know if others on this know this, but one of the things I think is really interesting about EVP is they do, and Shannon can summarize it probably better than me, but you have resources and that you partner with organizations to like help them with data tracking of their memberships engagement rates. If we also share like your tools. So I think that's really cool. Mass Automobile hasn't really done it a ton in the past. We haven't used that feature, but I'm interested in it. And it's not just me, the vice president of policy and advocacy called a meeting for Thursday to talk about get out the vote, but asked me to attend today because she forwarded the email from MCAN about this. So I'm excited to partner and do more this year. So I'll schedule a meeting with Shannon.
Perfect. Fred, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I wonder if I can help steer the conversation a little bit, because most of us on this call are local organizers. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I'm going to jump from there to presume that any of us could, if we wanted to, if we were motivated, organize locally to get a group of 10 to 30 people to do something because they care about climate. I think each of us could gather together 10 to 30 people to do something because they care about climate. So the question becomes, I think, for today, Shannon, if you can, what would you like to say to such people, the local organizers? Would you like them to just pick their dates on your calendar, not worry about having to connect with you in advance? Just pick dates from your calendar to get the 10 people in their town to show up on that date to do the calling that you have arranged. And if so, would you suggest they do that once per week, once per month from here to November? Can you give us some clues how you suggest people go forth from here to organize locally for the national picture? Thank you.
Yeah, perfect question. So I would say what Fred was kind of suggesting here is going to be the highest leverage opportunity with the lowest amount of like additional organizing effort on your part, which is we have 21 phone banks in April alone, and we've got more coming online for May and June over the next couple of weeks. These are already scheduled. We already have the reminders set to go. We have a trainer on board. So those are an opportunity where whether we have 5 volunteers on that call or whether we have 50 volunteers on that call, that infrastructure is already set up. That organizing effort to get all that together is already, for the most part, done. So if you all kind of adopt a date or adopt a few times a week or a month rather, that would be an excellent way for you to bring your community together on these calls. So we do have them as Zoom calls. It's a meeting just like this one where you can see each other. And often a good tactic is like, hey, I'm gonna be on the EVP call on Tuesday at noon. Hope to see you all there. Like, and letting people know like you will be able to see each other. What some groups have also done, so our phone banks are an hour and a half. And sometimes like if you wanted to put together your organization to have a 30-minute Zoom call after, you could suggest that people like, hey, after the EVP phone bank, we're going to debrief for 30 minutes on this other Zoom link, and have that be a chance for you to connect and share your experiences there. So I highly recommend that. If you think you're going to have a pretty big group, like typically we say 30 or more, we'd also be happy to set up an individual phone bank for like just you and your fellow organizers, where we would try to get a trainer on board or train you on how to train your fellow volunteers on how to make these calls. I'm focusing on phone calls because ultimately that is where we need the most support at EVP. We know that these calls are effective, and we just need more volunteers to make those calls to the 4.8 million voters. I'm not too shy to say like we are not going to be able to contact all of those millions of voters this year unless we have new volunteers joining and joining consistently. So our calls are available every single day from now through November 5th. We started our 2024 voter contact in the middle of December, actually, for the New York CD3 special election. So other than major holidays, we have no off days between now and November, and calls are open every single day. So you can get trained and either join one of our existing opportunities or set a new one for your group. And you can just work with me if you did want to have an alternate time, and we can make sure you get trained on how to train other people. We now have 3 standing weekly phone banks. So that's Tuesdays at noon Eastern time, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. and Fridays at 11 a.m. So every single week there is a phone bank at each of those times. And then on a weekly basis, we have anywhere between 2 and 4 other phone banks, typically in the evenings or on the weekends. Those are just not like always on the same date and time. So I highly recommend you all check those out and pick a time that works for your team to join us. Thank you so much, Fred.
Can I squeeze in a follow-up question? Just for those who've not done it before and they want to get their 10 people there, but they have no idea what happens when they show up, when they and their fellow organizees, the folks they've corralled into showing up, what happens when they show up? Sounds scary.
It's a good question. So hopefully it's not scary. A few things. So you'll join the Zoom call. There will be almost always another volunteer leading that phone bank. So it will be a peer. Obviously, we sometimes have staff do that, but mostly we have volunteers running these. So it's a friendly face. It's someone who joined for the first time, just like you at some point, and is now training other people. They're not professionals, but they're experts still. When you join the phone bank, that phone bank leader will welcome everyone and tell you about where we're calling that day. You don't need to have any prior information about that election, but they'll tell you about it. If you're already trained, then you break off and you start connecting to voters using our phone banking software. If you're new, the phone bank leader will go through a full training for you on how like some background about EVP, which now you already know, and how to make calls to voters. So we use a system called Hub Dialer for those that may have used dialers before. And it makes the phone banking process about 10 times as efficient as if I just gave you a spreadsheet of names to call through. So you call into a computer program, it's kind of the operator, and then the computer is routing you to particular voters. So you don't have to sit there and dial any numbers, and you don't actually have to wait for the phone to ring. Instead, you will just get connected when live voters pick up the phone. So that makes it pretty easy and pretty efficient for you to be able to connect with voters using Hub Dialers. And then there will be a debrief at the end where you can share your experience with your fellow volunteers.
Okay, thank you very much.